So the other day, my son asked me, Dad, how do banks work? I was like, oh, this will be great. I'm a financial guy. I'll be able to tell him this. I'm like, well, son, they rent your money by giving you a tiny bit of interest. And then they turn around and rent that out to other people for a much higher rate of interest. My son was like, but Dad, what's a tiny bit of interest? I'm like, oh, that's what your mom has every time I tell a joke. Right.
Nice.
But Dad, what if they lose our money? Oh, son, don't worry. That's why we have the FDIC to insure it. It's like an insurance company? Well, not exactly. It's the government. The government insures us with the taxes we pay. So you're telling me they just pay us back with our own money? Yeah. Is that why they give you a lollipop, sucker? Because you're dumb-dumb?
Hello, everybody. This is Ron Baker. Welcome to Empowered at Last. Today we are in for a treat. I know a lot of times I talk about internal things we can all do to empower self, but we also have outer situations in our lives that need our empowerment. And today our guest is a really practical, inspiring guy in finance, and who can't use some help in making wise financial choices. I don't know about you, but I grew up with zero financial advice and education from my family or the people around me. And so I am excited to share Garrett Gunderson with you today. And before we jump into him, I'm going to give you just a little bit about how he and I met. I was at something called Camp Maverick, which is a place where entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in training get together, have a great time, inspire each other, create networking and all of that. And on the final day of this event, a new face was in the crowd standing with the guy who was leading the event. And I was like, who is that guy? Now, he has a ponytail at the moment. However, when that hair is down, I was like, that guy kind of looks like a really tall Jesus. And I found out that not only am I not the first, but I'm not the 1,000th person who has told him such a thing. But his energy was apparent and got my attention right away. But it wasn't till that night that we made a real connection. And at this gathering, they have a talent competition. And I came out and sang a little something. And then after, Garrett walks out, and I had heard that he was a financial guru in the world, but I had no idea what an amazing comedian he is. He had the entire crowd laughing our butts off constantly. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried comedy, but it is not easy. It is a distinct gift, and Garrett has that gift. So in addition to having, he's like sickeningly accomplished. So having 6 books published, many of them bestsellers. I'll give you a couple of examples in case you want to go find his books. One is called Killing Sacred Cows, which is about debunking the financial myths that most of us have carried in our lives. Another one is called 101 Answers to the Toughest Financial Questions on the Planet. So you get the point. So today I asked him if he would come on and tell us about the fact that he's combining his gifts maybe for the first time in this way. He's about to do a 15-city tour, combining his comedy and his education about finance. He has helped thousands of families to learn how to make practical decisions around money that in many ways the system doesn't want the general population to know, in my opinion. And so we're going to find out about the comedy and a little bit about the finances. So it'll give you a taste so that I hope when I tell you more about this tour at the end of our conversation, you will go out and get your tickets. I already have mine. So let's jump in. Garrett, welcome to the show.
I figured that I should do 15 cities because it's my first time doing comedy, to make it complicated. Do the topic of money, keep it fairly clean, in the middle of a pandemic. And so I'm like,
No challenge.
I sold a home, bought a home. That's why I have like the lighting's a little hot on my face today, and there's a little bit of an echo. We don't have rugs for my new office yet, and sold a business. So I'm just seeing what levels of stress I can endure to find where that comedy could come from, right? Like to relieve that stress.
Absolutely. So rather than jumping into the obvious, which will be the financial education that you're going to offer, and by the way, when he does this tour, he's also got a few cities where he's going to offer a 2-day workshop. So anyway, you'll want to find out more about that, and I'll make sure to leave a link below this conversation so that you can find out how to explore further. But let's jump in from the comedy side first. So when do you discover that you have this real gift for comedy, and when did you have a feeling that it could truly impact the people around you?
The most common thread from both sides of my family was when we had family parties, everybody laughed hard and told jokes, and I would learn the inappropriate jokes from my uncles from the time I was a little kid and then repeat them and get laughs. And then it was in college where my buddy told me this joke, and then I created like this 10, 11 part series off this joke. And when I told my family the first time, they were laughing hysterically. So these were not jokes that I totally wrote. They were jokes I modified and took from different places and created this theme out of it. That was, I don't know, 1996 when I discovered that. And then I just went to my grandma's 90th birthday a couple months ago, and I had to tell the entire string of jokes. It's all she wanted for her birthday. So it really brought some connection with me and my family. And then I really tried it once in front of a crowd, impromptu, with too much tequila in 2005. I was at a formal financial function in Costa Rica. The jazz band gets done playing, and I just walk up there and start telling jokes that were not funny. People were laughing only because of how bad it was. My wife was embarrassed and exited the room.
I'm sure that's not true, but keep going with your humility.
Really bad. And, we can laugh at it, but not because of the jokes, more just because of the train wreck. And then in 2017, in August, I was telling some jokes to my wife at a baseball game. She goes, where'd you hear those? Those are funny. I'm like, from my own brain. And so that kind of cracked the door open, because Ron, she would always say, when I'd say, I think I should do stand-up comedy, she goes, I don't know if you're as funny as you think you are. I'm like, what do you mean? When I'm speaking, people are always laughing. She goes, yeah, you're making them money. They're being kind. She was just like scared for her own, self essentially. And then when I finally did my first stand-up set, August of 2017, she was in the front row white knuckling it because she was so not nervous for me, nervous for her. Because the night before I told her some jokes and she goes, I don't know if those are ready for the stage yet. Yeah, she helps me refine all this pretty well.
Yeah, well, I watched you grab Yannick Silver, is the head of the group that we were at, Camp Maverick. And I watched you grab his book and open up the foreword and begin reading, and you improv'd about every single thing. And I don't even think you had much time to prepare. So I'm sure this tour is going to be unbelievable.
I'll do another preparation today. Did one yesterday. Did two days and I've already filmed the special. We did it on April 15th.
Right.
Tax day. I'd only done 33 minutes on stage before that for comedy, and I did 3 hours and 50 minutes that night because we did 2 shows, and it's already edited. But now we're gonna go prove it out on the road and to get Netflix to pick it up. So I can
exactly. I was going to say, I have a feeling you're destined for Netflix, because that is how good it was that night that I saw you.
Thank you.
It's just a shame you don't have a great speaking voice or anything.
Well, I don't have the singing voice you do.
Well,
I don't have that, but
somebody had to get a few of the other gifts. So anyway, let's jump to money a little bit here. Money is a subject that tends to bring up fear in people so fast.
Oh.
And people contract, and we don't want to deal with it, and I don't even want to look, and I don't want to even know how much I have in the bank. And so I love listening, is how I tend to do books at this time when I'm so busy. I love just talking about the myths around banks and how everybody has just assumed that is the wisest choice. So maybe we can start there with a couple of overview things about how that's not the wisest place for people to have their money.
Yeah, and let me break down one thing that'll help create context for this.
Yeah.
So why money feels complicated to people, one of the reasons is because it's a representation of value. It's a storage of value. It's a man-made efficient tool for exchange. And when we look at value, time and effort are not equal in the mind of value. So someone can have a massive amount of impact in money with a lot less time and effort than it might look like from someone that's a physical laborer. And so as we look at those dollars, we think, okay, here I put in this effort, this person put in this effort, but they can go out to 20 restaurants and I go out to one for the same time and effort for where the dollar will go. And it has people feel like it's almost unfair and it's frustrating, and they don't almost want to examine it to really see the effectiveness of what they're up to, because they don't want to feel bad. And ultimately, far too often, people identify their value based upon how much money they have. And we have to realize it represents value, but it's not why you're valuable. It doesn't determine your destiny or even reflect your potential. Sure, it may mean what access you have to something as far as labor and things, but it doesn't tell you like where you're going unless you allow it to. And sometimes people identify themselves based upon their net worth, and they think their self-worth is the same thing, which then can create an inflated ego that has people separate themselves from people and therefore diminish the love that they have for themselves and others. And then they just try to keep filling the void with more stuff and more things and more status. And I only speak from personal experience there, Ron. I've been there, I've done it. It was not as fulfilling as I hoped it would be. Unfortunately, I have a strong wife who held a mirror up to my face and said, do you like what you see? Is this what you want? So when we now look at like money as a digital currency that we're now putting in the bank, and we've got some statement that has numbers telling us what value is in there, it's a little bit tough because first off, it's a very moving target. Even if the number says it's a number, it might be worth more or less depending on the day or the country or how much they've added to the computer screens that day and called it printing money. And so it might be like we're watering down the soup kind of thing where those numbers don't go quite as far. So that now becomes confusing for people because they have the fear of inflation. They have the fear of like, are they going to have enough money? Is what they're doing valuable enough to make the money that they want? If they have more money, will it make them happier? There's all these questions swirling inside of people's heads. And at the same time, you've got the banks telling us one set of rules, which is, hey, you should get a loan from us. And the shorter the loan, the lower the interest you'll pay. So we'll even help you out, which makes me suspect, why would the bank charge you less for something that's better than you? What you have to understand is they're in the game of cash flow, but they teach us the game of accumulation. The game of accumulation says, set it and forget it. Invest early, often, and always. You may have heard dollar cost average. You're in it for the long haul. This is all accumulation. And you hear people talk about wealth accumulation, but unfortunately, people shirk and abdicate responsibility when they accumulate. They hand their money over to a diversified portfolio and they hope and pray for the best that in 30 years or age 65, that it's all going to work out. But the US Department of Labor came out with some pretty startling statistics that 95% of Americans are not financially independent at age 65. If they stop working, they don't have enough money to handle the bills between Social Security, between a pension, between their retirement plans, between other assets. And it's not because there's a lack of effort. It's because first off, we underprepare from a standpoint of having liquidity in cash, transferring risk with insurance, setting up the foundation of our finances, and we're taught to skip over that and put money into a tax-favored retirement plan. And here's the thing. It's not necessarily as tax favored as people think, because saving tax and delaying tax are way different things. One means you don't have to. The other one means you don't have to right now. Because Ron, who doesn't want to wait till they're older and crankier to finally pay their taxes?
Delay the pain.
Right. And this is the neglect that we're taught. Don't think about it. Trust the experts. Well, most of the experts are well-intentioned salespeople. Most of the experts have no idea what stocks you actually hold and what's going on in the boardrooms of those companies and what fees are associated with it that are actually creating drag on your performance. And maybe before you invest that money, you could save on tax, and saving tax would put more money in your pocket. Or you could save on interest by renegotiating interest rates or restructuring loans. Or you could save on non-performing fees like legal fees, admin fees, 12B1 fees, expense ratios that aren't performing inside of mutual funds. Or
I'm going to interrupt 1 second.
yeah.
Because I know what it's like to hear that roll off of all those terms. When I first started hearing them, I was just like, even that talk overwhelmed me. But when you get Garrett's books, you can go at your own pace, one step at a time. Every term is defined. So back to Garrett, but I wanted to reassure my audience because I remember the first time I started hearing him, I go, that's inspiring, but man, am I lost.
Overwhelming. Yeah.
No worries. No worries.
The simple thing is, I just want to help people keep more of what they make first. Plug the financial leaks. Stop tipping the government. Stop overpaying institutions. Stop giving too much money to insurance companies if it's not designed properly. It's about having an elegant design that leads to more safety, protection, and cash flow. And when banks are telling you, hey, fund your retirement plan with our little retirement division here. Hey, put extra money into your mortgage because that improves their cash flow. Like, they have a different set of rules. Their entire rules are, hey, if you get a loan, I just got a loan on this home, you have to make a down payment. If you don't make a big enough down payment, they charge you private mortgage insurance, which is insurance for them. They made me get 2 appraisals on the property, which I paid for to protect them. They wanted to see my taxes. They wanted to see my credit score. They wanted to, know what the value of the home was with that appraisal that I mentioned. And so these are all ways that they manage risk. And then they create cash flow. They're not saying, hey, we'll just give you this money and you owe us something in 30 years from today. They get money along the way. So cash flow is more important than accumulation because it gives you measurement. Is this working? Is this coming in? And can eventually give you financial independence, which says when your assets produce enough cash flow to cover your expenses, you're financially independent. When your income that you actively earn has to cover your expenses, you're not financially independent. And that's where people try to take a percentage and set it aside and wait for a long period of time and hope it replaces their income. But Ron, let me break some bad news and I'll give some good news. Retirees right now that are in retirement have a very gnarly, scary situation. Number one, interest rates are so low that where do they put their money and keep it secure to create cash flow? Interest rates are so low. Like if you put it in a savings account, you're getting next to nothing. If you put it in a money market, it's minuscule. If you put it in a CD, it's not any good. Bonds are concerning because when interest rates are this low, if interest rates go up, it lowers the value of your bond and you can have losses. The stock market is at like such an all-time high. If you're retired, aren't you a little bit worried about how long will that last and sustain? And the government's talking about raising taxes. So if you're on a fixed income, and interest rates are low, you have less money off your nest egg. If taxes go up, that starts to eat away. And where people are really concerned is inflation. There's consequence to printing money. And so what happens in 3 or 5 years to a retiree living on a fixed income is they can't buy the same amount of stuff for the same amount of money, and taxes might confiscate it even more. So the first good piece of advice I have here on this bad news is create a life you don't want to retire from. Find a way that you can add value for the rest of your life and don't burn yourself out by sacrificing so much along the way. Create short trips, create time to yourself, find a hobby, find ways to protect yourself as your greatest asset, because too many people trade time for money, they burn out and they look forward to retirement because they don't enjoy their life. But when we have enough purpose to do something that we don't ever want to retire from, which comedy became that for me, well then I'm going to keep going. Even if I don't have to work, I get to choose to work because I'm financially independent. And when we're in choice versus necessity, there's less stress and there's more opportunity to create breathing room, to take some breaks along the way. And so create a life you don't want to retire from, plug your financial leaks, find a hobby that renews you, fulfills you, that doesn't matter whether you make money from it, just so that you could show up a little bit happier, a little bit healthier, and a little bit less stressed. And I think that that'll be pretty solid advice for one day.
So one point within that long list of truly every single thing he said is a whole realm of exploration. So one thing that Garrett just shared with us is about how inflation can happen because the government prints money. So my brain is simple. And so I keep everything crazy simple. So I'm just going to give an example. If this cup costs $1 And the government's like, you know what? We're in trouble. We need tons more money, so let's just print some. And now all of a sudden, instead of this cup being worth this $1, you print 10 times as much. So I don't have two hands over here, but you have 10. So that means this cup is now worth 1/10 of what it was worth before they printed the money. So hopefully that helps some of what his expertise.
Yeah, it's kind of like a restaurant you go to. You love the soup. And the government says, you know what? We're going to have to water down this soup because we need some of the soup for us because we are hungry. And so they take some of your soup, then put the rest of the water in. So it's still the same amount in the bowl, but it's not it doesn't give you the same nourishment and fulfillment. And it's the easiest way the government taxes is by printing money. Because when they print money, Ron, they're not even printing it. They just add it to computer screens. Like, think about it. How could you print $3 trillion in a few months? That is an amazing amount. It takes 32,000 years to count to a trillion. So how in the world, if they're printing sheets, is it printing fast enough for 3.5 trillion in 3 months? So we have to realize it's just getting out of computer screens. And ultimately, there's going to be consequence to that.
Yeah, it's delaying the pain from the government side in many ways. And then it'll take people by surprise, which is why it's great we have people like Garrett and his team that can educate us so that we make one step at a time wiser choices. One of my favorite examples is instead of putting money in a savings account in the bank where you make like 0.25%, which is nothing, it's pennies. Instead, there's a way for private citizens to become their own bank. And you can put money in there and you can borrow money and pay it back to yourself without these crazy other events. And this Garrett calls cash flow banking. Can you tell us a simple amount about that? I know that you have a website with Mike Dillard called cashflowbanking.com.
Yep. Yeah, so cashflowbanking.com. I don't own the website, but I endorse it, and they've licensed some of my content, and they're great people that are behind it. And so the concept is, if you can create an overfunded cash value insurance plan, that you could get 400 to 800% better interest through dividends than you can in a savings account. You don't have to pay tax on the growth of that, and you get access to that tax preferred rather than just tax delayed. And then you actually could save on term insurance costs by having it. You can have disability benefits that would keep paying if you couldn't pay it yourself due to disability. It's protected from liability and bankruptcy. And banks do this with bank-owned life insurance. Corporations do this with corporate-owned life insurance. But you have to design it properly. And unfortunately, 80 to 90% of what was being sold out there 20 years ago was not designed properly. The good news is, I think 30 to 40% of it is getting close to being designed properly. People are catching on. Agents are doing more of the right things. We've watched a real impact with it in the last 20 years. So that is kind of heartwarming. It's really good, but it still means more than half are not. More than half are high commission, low cash. We want low commission, high cash, and then give you this place where once you earn interest, it's guaranteed and can't be taken away from you. It's contractual and isn't subject to market whims and losses. I made the down payment on this house with my cash value. I bought a cabin with my cash value. I bought a land with the pond with my cash value. I bought, I've done all sorts of things with investments and then paid it back because I treat it like a bank. And so that's definitely something people can do.
So again, my simple mind, this basically equals you take your money, you put it into this particular kind of account that you can go to cashflowbanking.com and become educated about one step at a time. You ask every question you need in order to find out how you gain the interest. You get tax-free money, you borrow, you invest, and pay it back to yourself as if you're the bank. So it's a really cool thing if you set it up well. So follow up with Garrett at his various places, and I'll make sure we have some links for that so that you can find out how to set yourself up better.
So let me give one example, since I go fast and I get excited about finance.
I know, I love your passion.
this is how I would teach about banks in my comedy show. So the other day, my son asked me, Dad, how do banks work? I was like, oh, this will be great. I'm a financial guy. I'll be able to tell him this. I'm like, well, son, they rent your money by giving you a tiny bit of interest, and then they turn around and rent that out to other people for a much higher rate of interest. My son was like, but Dad, what's a tiny bit of interest? I'm like, oh, that's what your mom has every time I tell a joke. Right.
Nice.
But Dad, what if they lose our money? Oh, son, don't worry. That's why we have the FDIC to insure it. He's like, an insurance company? Well, not exactly. It's the government. The government insures us with the taxes we pay. So you're telling me they just pay us back with our own money? Yeah. Is that why they give you a lollipop, sucker? Because you're dumb? Yeah, just an example of
it's nice.
Like how to teach about banks, and that's pretty much a real conversation I had with my son.
So cool. You obviously have a smart son who's following in your footsteps and interested in all these beautiful things. So tell us about the tour.
So we filmed a special with 3 Emmy winners, including Marty Callner, who won an Emmy with Seinfeld, which is pretty amazing. And Barry Katz is my manager, who was the one behind Vicious Circle with Dane Cook and Whitney Cummings, and he represented Chappelle for 8 years. I mean, it's pretty spectacular. And so after filming it, we're like, all right, we're gonna pitch this to a streaming service, but I've not been known for comedy. And I just spent all this time preparing to do this American Dream comedy thing. I'm like, it'd be fun to do more of it. So we decided, let's take it on tour so that people can come and experience it, and I get to hang out with people and tell jokes, which I love to do, and they can laugh and learn. And they can get tickets at garrettgunderson.gg. That's GARRETT, so 2 R's, 2 T's, Gunderson, SON.GG. So garrettgunderson.gg is in Garrett Gunderson, great game, GG. And
that's a lot of personal validation in that name.
Yeah. So you get to see all the dates and select one that's nearest to you. And if you're a business owner, you want to bring your team, let us know, and we can give discounts for bulk tickets and that kind of stuff. We have a lot of people. I start in Tempe on September 7th, and we have a lot of people bringing team and bringing, family and friends. And we're always going to have a little partition part off where people can have 6-foot distancing and masks if they're COVID concerned or anything. We'll be really mindful of that. So, but I think it's time to see people again. When we filmed this in April, it was ecstatic. Just the energy was electric. It was so much fun. It was great to see everyone, and people learn while they're laughing, which makes you learn 3 times more, they say. So I'm like, we might as well laugh. And I made sure first and foremost, it was funny. You can see when you go to the site, and, people like Cindy Crawford saw the comedy special, said she loved it. So we got some celebrity endorsements, and then we've just got some of my friends that I let watch a preview of it or were there that night that kind of endorsed it. So, one of my friends even said, I didn't know you were funny, which is super hurtful and pretty much means he's on the list of being roasted sometime down in the near future. You got to be careful with that kind of stuff. But yeah, and I really appreciate our relationship, that you brought me on to interview and reiterate some of the things that I say when I just machine gun some of these pieces of information.
Well, I just remember what it was like the first time I heard your financial education, because you do get so passionate and excited. And we are so ill-educated on the planet that those regular people like me have to take it one step at a time. And as you build confidence, then you can go and have these conversations and feel really so much safer than people tend to now. So
if people go to the bottom of the website, there's a money quiz to figure out which of the 4 money personas you are that dictate and determine your financial decisions. So then you can understand the good and bad sides of that money persona so that you can make better choices and decisions with your money and kind of heal with some of the scarcity that comes with money sometimes. So that's helpful. And just want to tell you one more story is I actually been working on a one-man show for the last couple of years. That way I can actually slow down and play characters and play the guitar and do spoken word so that this could really sink in, because I realized have this tendency to get excited and go too fast. And a lot of I got to pause and allow people to receive it and process it. So I hired a director and a screenwriter, and in the 5 cities that I'm performing, I'm actually going to open with that, which we did a test run April 16th, and it was the most impact I've ever seen with me on stage, just understanding how to reach people in a big way. So I'm really excited to be bringing that out so that it is more accessible, so it is more able to be internalized, and it's performance-based, so it's entertaining so that people lose track of time but remember what they were hearing.
And it gives us a chance to see many more of your talents. What can we say?
I'm working on them, man. Some of these, I call them perfectly imperfect. Like,
That's right.
I want to
Absolutely.
get this on Broadway, and I may be the worst singer, worst guitar player ever to make it there, but it's because it's the culmination of bringing all these things together in a way that's just an expression of me. And my mantra is expression, not perfection. Right?
Yes, it's all about heart. It's all about heart and sharing the experience of each other's gifts and how we can all help each other. So I think it is really awesome. So I'm going to give listeners an awareness that in the next 2 months, Phoenix, La Jolla, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Las Vegas, and Salt Lake are the cities. And then there are tons more in the months that follow. So I'm going to leave all the links below this conversation and make sure that you have access to the books, to the tour, to all the crazy things that Garrett is up to. And I thank you so much for being here. It really, really is always a joy to connect.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This is the best part about comedy, is connecting with people and having a reason to just chat and laugh, you know?
Nice. So I will see you on stage next time, I have a feeling.
This is going to be great.
Have a great week, everybody.
Want to master your money? Want to figure out the things that you could do to improve your finances? Click here and check out more videos like this on Money Matters.